This is the plaintiff, Arthur Hudson. He says the defendant, his ex-roommate, bullied him out of the apartment they shared because the guy has socioeconomic hang-ups. He paid the landlord for 2 months of rent he didn't get to live out. The defendant owes him, and man, he wants it now. He's suing for $3,000, the amount due. This is the defendant, Linwood Young. He says the plaintiff's one of those very hard people to live with. In fact, the guy's a horrible human being, and living with him was just awful. Thankfully, he moved out, and when he discovered he accidentally paid the landlord 2 months' rent, he decided to come after him instead of the landlord. Bottom line, he's got the wrong person in court today, and he owes the troublemaker nothing. He's accused of driving a roommate mad.
All parties, please raise your right hands.
Welcome back to the People's Court. Next case on the docket. The plaintiff says his ex-roomie forced him out of the apartment because of what he calls socioeconomic hang-ups. But the defendant says the plaintiff is the tough one to live with, and he's bad to the core. It's the case of you give renters a bad name.
Thank you, Douglas. Arthur Hudson?
Hello.
Okay. You are suing Linwood Young for $3,000 rent from November and December, $500 a month, plus $1,000 security deposit, plus $1,000 mental anguish.
That's correct.
Tell me what's going on.
Well, I'm suing for the $1,000 that I paid.
So you two met, and how did you decide you were going to room together?
We met online through a Facebook ad.
Okay.
For a Craigslist ad.
Craigslist asked for roommates or for something else?
For roommates.
Okay. How long did you live together?
It was over a year and a half.
Who was on the lease?
I was on the lease, and Linwood was on the lease.
The two of you were on the lease?
Right.
All right. And then what happens?
Things really went south, and I felt bullied. I was pushed out.
How?
I was pushed out because there was someone already crashing in the kitchen, and I felt like at first it was just, oh, he's going to be looking for a place in a transitional period, but he was in line to take over my room, and I was pushed out. But
I don't see how somebody pushes you out. Your name is on the lease. That's why I asked that. So how?
Well, I was pushed out because they didn't like me. I was bullied. I was harassed.
Okay, those are all conclusions. I want to know exactly who's they, by the way?
They is Linwood.
But just Linwood, or is there somebody else involved?
I felt harassed by the other roommate, Brendan, who moved in.
Is Brendan here?
No, he's not.
Okay. And Brendan is somebody who moved in after you two were already living there?
Right.
Okay.
We had a third roommate. He took his place.
Okay. But the third party was never on the lease. It's just the two of you on the lease?
That's correct.
And the lease was still going on when you were, quote, pushed out?
That's right.
Okay. But you realize that you have rights and that you could have stayed there. It sounds like it was uncomfortable, it was unpleasant. You really didn't want to stay there anymore anyway.
That's correct.
That sound right? Okay. So what was it that made it uncomfortable and unpleasant and you felt bullying?
I felt harassed. I felt like they didn't like me. I felt like they wanted...
What kinds of things would they do that led you to those conclusions?
They've told me that they didn't like me. They told me that I was lazy. They told me that, I was a troublemaker. They told me they didn't like me. And in the end, I thought that they wanted their other friend to move in, and they didn't want me there.
Right.
And I felt scared.
Okay. So you move out when?
I moved out Halloween.
Okay. And then what happens? Because all the stuff that happens that you're suing for actually happens after you move out, right?
Right.
What happened?
That's because I really didn't know what to do in the sense that, the room was still in my name.
Right. Did you talk to the landlord to get your name off of the lease?
I tried.
But the landlord won't?
The landlord was difficult.
Right.
Especially about the security deposit.
Right. Okay, so go on.
So I was scared and I didn't really know how to act, and that's why it took me so long. So I didn't know what was going to become of my room in terms of it being damaged, anything like that, because I'm not there. So I kept paying rent for 2 months, and that's because the communication was terrible. I was told by Hiram Flores that I would have
Who's
money.
Hiram Flores?
That was the person who took over my room that was crashing in the couch.
Okay.
And he's the subletter that I did not choose because I was told I could not choose them.
Okay. So go on.
I kept paying because I didn't know what was going to happen.
Kept paying who?
Straight to the landlord.
Straight to the landlord.
For 2 months.
So you paid the $500 that was your share and for 2 months, for November and December.
Right.
Okay, go on.
I actually have the sublet form that I tried to get them to do it. I offered to meet them, not halfway between our neighborhoods, but I offered to meet them in Bushwick.
So kick him out.
To notarize this.
But see, you have rights. And if somebody's staying in a room that you're on the lease for, get the guy out of there. I mean, it may not be worth your effort, but you have a right to bring this to a head. We're going to bring this to a head to some extent here now. What's going on?
Hi. So basically, we met through a Craigslist ad. I had found an apartment that I needed to have another roommate for, and he answered the ad. I needed someone within that day. It was a very rushed decision to make. So I met with him. We met and signed the papers.
Why would you need a roommate that day to sign a lease and live with? Meet somebody for 15 minutes that you decide you're going to live with for a year?
It was a poor
Your
decision.
lack of planning is like somehow some huge emergency? I mean, yeah, but it's due to your lack of planning that something like that happened.
I agree completely, Your Honor. But so we were living together and we were having a difficult time together. He moved in a friend.
What was the problem?
He, the first problem, which wasn't really a problem, he wasn't around a lot, which I didn't really have an issue with. But when he was there, he was very loud. He had friends that were coming over at all hours, making lots of noise. I had to tell him on a few occasions to keep it down because we live in a building with families that have to work in the morning. So I didn't want to disturb our neighbors. I didn't want to disturb me or anybody else in the apartment. He moved in a friend of his, I believe it was late May, and I was under the assumption he made it seem like it was someone he had known for a long time. But afterwards, I found it was only someone he had known for a week. And that I found completely unacceptable because I just found it as a danger to safety, because fortunately the person he moved in was a nice person and we got along very well, but it could have been someone that could have been dangerous, or it could have been someone that could have stolen our property or something like that. So I sent him a letter. I have this letter right here. September.
Sent the guy who lives 4 inches from you a letter?
Well, because I wanted something written down. Exactly.
Had you talked to him about whatever's in here?
He knew that we were having difficulty living together. So I basically asked that he would leave the apartment. And we did have a friend that was going to move in at that September date. His name was Jeffrey. But because he waited so long to actually leave.
We're on different pathways. And while the situation here has been a hot mess for a while. We don't really seem to gel. We're on different pathways where I'm trying to settle down a bit. And you're still new to the New York City experience. So you're still trying to appreciate it all. There's nothing wrong with that. You deserve to move here and feel out this city the way you'd like. I feel like we're impeding on each other's path. You deserve to live with people that you not only like, but want to hang out with as well. We would like for you to move out so that Jeff can move in this week. We would store your things so that they were safe because we respect your property. I think the best situation would be that Jeff pays you directly. Who's Jeff?
Jeff would have been the other person that would have been moving in, because I had a friend of mine that was looking for a place to stay.
Pays you directly for the rent. We could still send your mother's checks into the office. That way you have $500. And then your mother will be duped. $500. Why? Because his mother pays his rent?
Yes. His mother pays his rent and gives him a $1,000 stipend every month.
Do you work?
I did. I don't work right now. I'm in the process of applying for public assistance, trying to get a job. I'm thinking
Where are you from?
I'm from Alabama.
How long ago did you come to New York?
About 2 years ago, I was staying in a hostel and trying to find a place.
You miss Alabama?
No.
I don't want you to think this is in any way trying to strong arm you into doing anything you don't want to do. I just feel like it would be all better with different living conditions. Were you guys behind on the rent?
Yes, we were.
How much were you behind on the rent? Exactly the $1,000?
It was, I'm not sure if it was exactly the $1,000, but it was somewhere near the $1,000. Our third roommate left the country owing that money.
Okay, so you're now behind when he moves out at your request. And with his consent, because he moved out, he didn't say, no, I'm staying put. All right. You guys are $1,000 in the hole to the landlord.
Yes.
The two of you, because you're the two leaseholders.
Yes.
Okay. You, of course, can go sue that third guy if you can chase him.
He's in Nairobi.
Oh, well, that's how it goes, right? but the landlord doesn't have to chase Nairobi man.
No.
He just has to chase you guys. You guys have the legal obligation to the landlord on that lease. All right. So it's $1,000 in the hole. You then, because you don't want to deal with it, pay the $1,000 to the landlord, even though you're not getting, who ends up moving in? You? Come on up. Even though you're not getting rent from him, I don't know why you're doing that, but the landlord keeps the money because lo and behold, it's $1,000 that you guys owe the landlord. And you are paying the landlord directly. Yes or no? I
Yes,
want to hear you out
I
loud.
am.
What's your name?
Hiram Flores.
Okay, and Hiram, you're paying November and December, you pay.
Correct.
And January, February, March, April, May, you've been paying the landlord?
Correct.
Wow. Okay. So, Mr. Young, how do you figure that as to that $1,000, he's got to eat it to the landlord?
So, would you ever use Craigslist to find a roommate? What do you think?
No, I would not.
Why not?
I'm just like very private. I'll be scared to bring like a stranger into my house.
Okay, it is a stranger. Anybody here? Would anybody here use Craigslist? Anybody? Why wouldn't you?
You just don't know who you're going to get. It's so unpredictable.
But isn't it true that sometimes you don't know the person until you live with them? Isn't that true too?
That is true, but I feel like Craigslist is very unpredictable. It's off the internet. I just don't trust it.
Very single white female, right? Got your point. Going inside the courtroom.
I was in talks with him to get him that money, but then he got very nasty with me, so I told him I wouldn't do it.
Why can't you just do the right thing even when someone's nasty? Because then it might be that, you just don't feel like paying. All right, that's that $1,000 thing. The next $1,000 is a security deposit. Now, the security deposit, you don't pay to him. The security deposit, you pay to the landlord. The landlord is not going to return your security deposit. Why? Well, he is eventually, but he's not going to return it now because your lease isn't over. The landlord has a right to that security deposit to hold on to it until the end of that lease in August to make sure there's no damages to the place. So if it turns out that he damages it, you can have a lawsuit. This is a separate, different other day lawsuit against either Linwood or the person who damaged it, who's subletting your place, even though there's not a written agreement. All right? Because they're not entitled to end up messing up your chance to get back your security deposit. But that is premature. So as to that $1,000, I'm going to dismiss without prejudice. That means you have a right to bring it up should it ever get there. Maybe you're lucky and the landlord just returns a deposit when the lease is over and we don't even have these issues. Now, the $1,000 for mental anguish, unable to pick the person to rent out your room. I don't see how this would ever entitle you to $1,000, even if I did find that somehow somebody put a gun to your head and made you leave, which I don't. I think you had a roommate situation. It was an uncomfortable roommate situation. You guys didn't gel, and they made you feel uncomfortable, so you decided to leave. But I think that you might be a little bit guilty of just worrying about having a good time in New York City as opposed to paying attention to your responsibilities. Because another guy in your shoes might actually be there some night and say, listen, you and I need to talk. Here's the paperwork. I printed it out off of the internet. This is the sublease. I want you to understand you're responsible to me for anything that happens. Some other guy might have done that. You're not the guy who did that. So I find you're not entitled to any mental anguish. The one thing that is ripe and that I'm going to decide in your favor on part way is the November, December. Because I find that since the two of you are the ones on the lease, the two of you needed to have covered Nairobi to the landlord. So I'm going to order you to pay $500 to him plus his court costs. And then I'm going to dismiss without prejudice the security deposit issue until that is ripe, which is after the lease. And I'm going to rule in your favor on the mental anguish. That's my judgment. Good luck,
Thank you.
folks.
Find out what the defendant has to say coming out of the courtroom here. What's your reaction to the judge's ruling here?
I find that it's fair. I think she made a very wise decision, but I'm just glad I don't have to live with him anymore.
Why couldn't you live together?
He's an idiot.
What are you talking about? What is that?
He stays up at late hours. He's constantly loud. He steals from people. He's just an idiot.
You said he was an ideal roommate. How is this? Why do you two see it so differently?
An ideal roommate doesn't move someone into the apartment that you've known for a week.
Okay. All right. Just head right around the corner. Okay. All right. Come on in here. And here he is, the ideal roommate, right?
I feel like I was the ideal roommate because he really only asked me to be quiet once or twice or 3 times. I didn't steal anything. I knew this guy for 2 weeks. He was in a similar situation to me coming from the South. I trusted him a lot. He's a great guy.
Did you know that he had these problems with you, these personal issues or roommate issues?
No, not until about 3 months before I left when I felt like I was being harassed.
Mm-hmm. What did he do to harass you?
He told me that I was a loser. He told me that he passed lots of socioeconomic judgments.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you're better off.
I'm better off.
Yeah. Okay. Harvey?
You know, when you don't get along with a roommate, best thing to do, literally, is just say, hey, look, let's sit down, let's work out some kind of a compromise. It's not working out. Rather than going to war, actually kind of de-escalate it. Sit down with them and say, how can we resolve this? And it may be that I move out and give you money or do this or whatever, but try to actually work it out. It will disarm the other person. That will do it for this case. Litigants for the next case on the way into the courtroom right now.